Happy Friday, traders. Okay, this week has been a bit of a quiet week in markets, especially as far as important economic data is concerned. We haven't really had too much of that. But look, we did have a central bank meeting this week. That was the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, the RBNZ. And yes, they did raise interest rates. They raised rates from 2.25% to 2.5%. And that was the first rate rise from the RBNZ in 3 years. Look, the key takeaway is that central banks globally are all starting to raise rates again. So look, it has been a bit of a slow burn, but it is moving in that direction. So the global easing cycle is well and truly over, and those lower rates that have been supporting markets slowly now is being taken away. And next week we do have the Bank of Korea here in Asia, and yes, they are also expected to raise rates, taking their rates from 2.5% to 2.75%. But the big one is obviously going to be the FOMC, the Fed. They don't meet until the end of the month, the 29th of July. Markets only pricing in about a 30% chance that they hike rates. But look, if they obviously don't hike rates this month, the following meeting, which will be in September, is certainly a live meeting for the Fed to join the global CBs and start tightening it as well. Okay, but look, what has been moving markets this week and potentially what can move it today and over the weekend is the geopolitical tensions are back. So this week on Wednesday, Trump at the G7 meeting, he ripped up the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding between the US and Iran. He basically said in pretty harsh tone that Iran, they were liars, that they can't be trusted, that they are violent people, and he even went as far as to say that they are scum. Pretty amazing stuff. On the back of those comments, and then also the fact that the US did start bombing Iran again, we saw crude oil have a good spike, and it was the biggest mover this week. That went up pretty much 10%, and we went up towards $76. So that's a decent spike from the recent lows we saw last week, below $70, around that $68, $67 level. But yesterday, post that crude spike, Trump did come out and say that Iran has called him and wants to make a deal. Look, it's absolutely comical stuff. Obviously Trump is trying to manage crude, and he's done a really good job of it. But it's unbelievable that the market still believes these lies, because obviously we're nowhere near any deal, and probably Iran is not calling Trump at all. But in any case, he got crude lower by 3% on the back of those headlines, and we're opening, and crude is opening up around about $72 this morning. But overnight, yes, with the lower crude prices, we did see markets trade risk on. So US equity indexes, NASDAQ, S&P were both up over 1%. We did see also the US dollar, some US dollar selling, and also obviously precious metals benefit from that, and gold trading up towards 41.40 again. But obviously those moves are sort of more, I guess, not new directional moves. We're just sort of bouncing around in ranges at the moment. But the key takeaway here is that, look, market is, whatever you're trading at the moment, you are trading crude. Crude spikes up, risk off. If crude does go lower, obviously risk on. But we are going into what is called the weekend. Weekends is obviously when we have gap risk. And I would suggest the fact that we have this heightened geopolitical tensions again. If Trump is planning something big for Iran, generally it always happens on weekends when markets are closed. So I suggest I would not be selling crude going into the weekend. You certainly don't want to have the gap risk of a huge spike in crude on Monday. And also, look, crude has sold off down towards $72 and just below. Look, I think that I would not be chasing crude shorts down here, and certainly bias would be long. But look, in any case, there really isn't much risk events data-wise or anything going into the end of the week, into the weekend. So market is going to be firmly focused on any headlines really with what's going on with this geopolitical risk. And again, trading into the weekend, I'd be surprised if crude did not finish up towards somewhere near the highs on the day, unless we got some positive headlines, which I'd be surprised if we did get. So bias long crude. Good luck with your trades and have a great weekend.